Commissioner Lander was admitted as a barrister and solicitor of the Supreme Court of South Australia in 1969. He practised as a solicitor until 1981, and in 1986 he was appointed Queen's Counsel. In 1994 he was appointed as a judge of the Supreme Court of South Australia, and he remained a judge of that court until he was appointed a judge of the Federal Court of Australia, July 14, 2003. In 2004 he was appointed an additional judge of the Supreme Court of the Australian Capital Territory, and in December 2008 he was made a judge of the Supreme Court of Norfolk Island. He continued to live in Adelaide while he had held those two appointments. In 2005 he was appointed a Deputy President of the Administrative Appeals Tribunal for 5 years and then reappointed for a second term. In April 2013, he was awarded an honorary Doctorate of Law by Flinders University for his contribution to the law and Flinders University. I see on his CV, which has been supplied to me, that naturally he resigned all his judicial appointments before he took up his current appointment as Commissioner in South Australia of the ICAC. Rotarians and guests, I give you Commissioner Lander.
Thank you very much. When the Independent Commission Against Corruption Act commenced on the 1st of September 2013, two offices were created. The Office for Public Integrity and the Independent Commission Against Corruption. The Act has designed the offices so that they work harmoniously in that I was appointed Independent Commissioner, but I'm also responsible for the Office for Public Integrity. The Office for Public Integrity is the window for complaints and reports in relation to corruption, misconduct and maladministration in South Australia. The Act is concerned with public administration and with public authorities and public officers. It is also concerned with those people who are engaged in contractual relationships with public authorities, and for that purpose it deems people who are engaged in contractual relationships with the public authority as public officers. The Act is concerned with three types of conduct, as I've mentioned. All unacceptable conduct being corruption, misconduct and maladministration. Corruption is defined in the Act to include a series of offences under the Criminal Law Consolidation Act and offences under the Public Sector Honesty and Accountability Act, and any offence committed by a public servant during the course of the public servant's discharge of the public servant's duties. To that end, the definition of corruption is extraordinarily wide. It effectively picks up any offence committed by any public officer during the course of the public officer's carrying out his or her duties. That means that if the public officer has as part of his or her duties the responsibility of driving a motor vehicle and drives a motor vehicle in excess of 60 kilometres an hour, that person will have committed an offence and will therefore be found to have been guilty of corruption. I'm not expecting to investigate any of those matters. The purpose of the Act is to require me to investigate serious corruption. And serious corruption for the purpose of the Act is bribery, extortion, abuse of public office and the like. Since the Act has commenced, we have received in excess of 800 reports, and we're presently investigating in our office about 40 matters of corruption. I'll explain how that comes about. If a report is to be made in relation to conduct of this kind in public administration, the report must be made to the Office of Public Integrity. No one is entitled to make any report to me, the report must be made to the office, and it is for the office to determine whether the matter should be investigated. When the report is made, the office considers the report, obtains sufficient information to assess the report, and must assess the report as either corruption, misconduct or maladministration, or make an assessment that the matter should not be inquired into for the reason that the matter is trivial, vexatious or frivolous, or it's been previously inquired into by some other body. Complaints are made, reports are made by public officers, and complaints are made by members of the public, and there are many complaints. The experience so far has shown that more than 50% of the complaints that are made by the public are trivial, vexatious or frivolous. When the office commenced on the 1st of September, there was a queue of people all the way down Curry Street waiting to make complaints that are made to every other body in South Australia over the last 30 years. This was yet another opportunity to be heard on a matter of no consequence. Indeed, we've had some extraordinary reports. We had a report of where a complaint was made that a judicial officer had taken a bribe. I was a judge for nearly 20 years and never in my experience have I heard that any judge would have accepted a bribe, certainly not in South Australia, perhaps in some of the other countries. It seemed to me to be very serious. But when it was inquired into, it became less serious. The reason for the complaint, or the evidence underlying the complaint, was that the complainant had been involved in litigation and lost the case. She therefore deduced the judge to be bribed. That was the sum total of the evidence, the fact that she lost. So it didn't seem to be terribly serious. Then it even became less serious when we found out that the case was heard 43 years ago. That seemed to me to demonstrate a really good hater. The Office for Public Integrity has to weed out those matters which are of no consequence, because it's a waste of public resources for my office to inquire into matters that are of no consequence. Once it's made its assessment, the office makes recommendations to me as to how the matter should be dealt with. I'm entitled, because of the powers that I've given, to reject any assessment made by the office and to reject any recommendation that's made to me. And curiously enough, I can make a recommendation to myself as to how the matter should be dealt with. So far, every recommendation I've made to myself, I've followed. The matters are dealt with in different ways. If a matter is assessed as raising an issue of corruption, it can be investigated by my office, it can be investigated by SAPOL at my direction, or it can be investigated by the Police Ombudsman. All three of those have been chosen as appropriate in relation to complaints and reports that have been made. Where the matter is extraordinarily serious, it's being investigated by my office. Where the matter relates to a police officer, but is not, I would say it's significant, it's significant but not serious matter of corruption. For example, a police officer who has breached a code of conduct. It's being investigated by the Police Ombudsman. And where the matter is better suited to be investigated by SAPOL through its anti-corruption branch, it's being investigated by that branch. I thought when I commenced in the job, in the position, I would insist that all matters of corruption be dealt with by my office. But experience has shown that the anti-corruption branch is well suited to investigate many of the matters which is called upon to investigate. If a matter is assessed as misconduct or maladministration, it's dealt with differently. A matter that's assessed as misconduct or maladministration can either be referred by me to the public authority in which the misconduct or maladministration is said to have taken place for investigation and to be dealt with by that authority. It can be referred to an inquiry agency, and an inquiry agency is the Ombudsman or the Police Ombudsman or the Commissioner for Public Sector Employment. Or it could be referred to that agency and then clawed back by me and investigated by me. Again, in respect of all of those three alternatives, I've adopted those in relation to different matters. Again, I thought that when I assumed the office that I wouldn't allow a public authority to investigate its own conduct or the conduct of its own employees. I thought that would be inappropriate. But since I've been in the office, I've realised I was wrong about that. It is appropriate for a public authority often to investigate misconduct of junior employees within its organisation. In those circumstances, it's part of the disciplinary process for the authority to engage in its own inquiry. The safeguard from the transparency and integrity aspects is that the public authority must report to me as to what it has done and how it has dealt with the matter. If I'm not satisfied with the way in which the authority has dealt with the matter, I can require the authority to deal with it again, and if I'm still not satisfied, I can include that in my report to Parliament, which must be given each year. I've also referred a number of matters to the Ombudsman for inquiry, where the Ombudsman is best suited to carry out those sorts of inquiries. There are some other matters, of course, that should not be investigated by public authorities, where the conduct is said to be misconduct on the part of its employees, and that sort of conduct is where the conduct that's been engaged in is of a senior person within the agency. It would be inappropriate in those circumstances to require or to allow the public authority to investigate that conduct, because I don't think a complainant would see that as being a transparent recognition of the complaint. The Act required me, on assuming office, to publish what are called directions and guidelines, and they are directed to all public officers as to how they should report matters to the Office of Public Integrity. I published those on the 1st of September, and those directions and guidelines require all public officers to report all matters of corruption, misconduct, serious misconduct, and serious and systemic misconduct in maladministration to the Office of Public Integrity. The idea is that the Office of Public Integrity, therefore, will be what Tony Abbott described as a suppository of all knowledge. It should be made aware of all allegations of corruption, misconduct, or maladministration in South Australia, and that seems to be working reasonably well. The matters that are most serious, of course, are those that relate to corruption. After 6 months in office, I can report there is no evidence of systemic corruption in South Australia, which is a very welcoming thing from a South Australian point of view. Each of the other integrity agencies in Queensland, West Australia, New South Wales and Victoria were all set up for the purpose of reacting to what was thought to be systemic corruption of a kind, either in their police force, in their police forces, or in their public sector. That, fortunately, was not the case in South Australia. There was no suggestion before the Act came into force that there was any systemic corruption. And I can report that there is no evidence been given to me, and I would have thought I would have received it so far, of systemic corruption in South Australia. What we have is what I might call opportunistic corruption, where someone who has the opportunity of bettering themselves at the expense of the public purse takes that opportunity. And as a result, we're investigating, as I said, many matters of corruption ourselves. We're jointly investigating other matters of corruption with the South Australian Police Force, and we expect the numbers of what are called opportunistic allegations of corruption to increase. The Act has very wide powers. It has extraordinary coercive powers of the kind that are given to the Australian Crime Commission. And I can exercise those powers when investigating corruption. I can require a public authority to make a statement. I can require a public officer to make a statement. I can require public authorities and public officers to produce any documents that I require to me for my investigation. I can require any public officer, or any person in fact, to give evidence before me in relation to an investigation into corruption. It's an offence not to attend if summoned. It's an offence not to take an oath or affirmation when required, and it's an offence not to answer any question that I might ask of the witness during the hearing. They are very wide powers. There are no other powers of that kind given to a state instrumentality in South Australia. They are similar to the powers that are given to the integrity agencies in the other states, and as I said, are powers that are given to the Australian Crime Commission. The powers that are necessary, it seems to me, for the detection of corruption. Corruption is difficult to detect. Obviously, it's not the sort of crime that's carried out in open. People who are corrupt aren't inclined to boast about it, and usually it's carried out in conjunction with other people who also profit by the conduct. For example, where there's bribery of some kind, the person providing the bribe and the person taking the bribe both will profit by the corrupt conduct. So the powers that we've given are appropriate, it seems to me, for the type of matters into which I'm inquiring. We've had 2 hearings so far, and we expect to have a number more in the near future. In both of those hearings, both of the witnesses attended, took the oath and answered the questions. The protection for the witness, if the witness is the person of interest in relation to answering questions that may incriminate them, is that the evidence that they give at a hearing before me is not admissible against them if they are later charged with a criminal offence, which is the subject of the investigation. So if they answer a question before me where they admit, as they're obliged to do, that they admit that they were the public officer that took the bribe, the evidence is not admissible, that admission is not admissible against them in a subsequent criminal trial. You might ask, well, what's the purpose of having the hearing? Well, there are 2 purposes, of course. The first is that the evidence, whilst not admissible, may also disclose that someone else who can give admissible evidence about the same event. For example, the person who's taken the bribe might say, yes, I took the bribe, I admit that. And the next question, was anyone else present? Yes, my wife was present. Her evidence would be admissible against him, so you would find out who was able to give admissible evidence at the same time as you receive inadmissible evidence. The second reason to interview persons of interest is to wedge them up. That is to say that if the person we're talking about admitted that he took a bribe and was later prosecuted for accepting a bribe, he couldn't give evidence contrary to that in his trial. He could, of course, but if he did, he would be either perjuring himself at the trial or would have perjured himself before me. So he's wedged. So whatever answer he gives at the hearing before me must be the same answer that he eventually would give if he had actually given evidence at his trial. There are a number of difficulties with the Act. There are a number of practical difficulties. The Act has been written in a way that seems to avoid reputational harm to people. The Act tries to keep private everything that is reported to me and everything I do. And the purpose of that is to avoid reputational harm to any person who is wrongly reported to me or who, after being reported, is found not to have engaged in corruption. Now, the reason for this, I think, arises out of the last Queensland state election. You might remember that the CMC, the Crime and Misconduct Commission in Queensland, played a prominent part in the last state election. It wasn't a willing participant, but what happened was that during the course of the election, the Premier often reported the then leader of the opposition to the CMC, claiming that he, Campbell Newman, had been guilty of corruption. The CMC would then investigate it, and then later, within a day or within 24 hours, announce that the investigation had taken place, but no corruption had been found. And then the Liberals picked up this tactic, and they reported and applied the same way to the CMC. And so through the whole of the election campaign, the CMC was used wrongly by the politicians for the sake of producing their opposition, for the sake of claiming that their opposition was subject to So I think the Act has been written in South Australia by politicians to protect themselves from themselves. Section 56 of the Act, as I say, makes it an offence for anyone to publish information that they have reported, or will report, or may report a person to the Office of Public Integrity. So it is an offence if you as a member of the public were to report a public officer to the Office of Public Integrity. It would be an offence for you to publish that information to any other person. Publish is defined in the Act very widely, so that, in my opinion, publish means to tell anyone else. It doesn't mean to say it publicly, it means to tell anyone else. The result of that is, if my opinion is right, it appeals to me at least, and if my opinion is right, it means that you couldn't, after reporting someone to the Office of Public Integrity, tell anyone else with whom you worked that you'd done so. You can see the practical problems arising out of that immediately. Take, for example, in an agency where a person, at say the human resources level, reports someone to the Office of Public Integrity for corruption, that person couldn't tell the CEO of the same agency that he or she had done so. That would be just an impossible situation, because if the CEO later found out that person who had been reported was committing corruption, he'd want to know why it hadn't been reported to the Office of Public Integrity, whereas in fact it had, but he couldn't be told. So the Act is over-engineered, as I've said publicly a number of times, so that the proper conversations that should take place in relation to when reports have been made to the Office can't happen. There is one way around it. The Act allows me to authorise people to have the conversation, and I've made it known publicly that people should ask of me to give authority for them to tell people who need to know when a report has been made to the Office of Public Integrity. Persons who don't need to know, of course, are the persons who are the persons of interest. They shouldn't ever know the report has been made until it suits the investigation to let them know. Ladies and gentlemen, that in 25 minutes is an overview of what the Office for Public Integrity and the Office of the Independent Commissioner Against Corruption is all about. The design of the offices is to provide for better governance in South Australia by trying to prevent or minimise corruption, misconduct and maladministration at every level. Part of my duties are to educate people within the public sector in relation to that, and as a result of that I speak often to audiences within the public sector in relation to their obligations. At the moment I'm conducting a set of seminars. There are 12 seminars over the next 6 days. I'll come from one this morning, I'll go back to one this afternoon, where we're having senior members of the public service in and trying to educate them in relation to the culture of proper governance and how we can improve the governance of the public sector in South Australia, which I think is in all of our interests. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Chair and guest, the Commissioner has kindly consented to answer some questions if you have. Chris, Mr. Moore.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much for that interesting address. I was particularly interested in your comments about the abuse, or I'm not sure that is the word you used, but the treatment by politicians in Queensland of the equivalent body there. It does seem to me that in the political camp there's an increasing tendency not to understand the separation of powers, and to separate the separation of Parliament as the lawmakers and police as the prosecutors and the judges as the judges. Does that, well, first of all, I don't really have to comment on that, but more importantly, does that tendency impinge in any way on your office?
I agree with the general proposition that there's been a blurring of the distinctions between the three organs of government, between Parliament, the Executive and the Judiciary, and therefore Commonwealth, in the Commonwealth countries, is that the executive has grown in importance to the detriment of the Parliament and also to the judiciary. When I started practising law far too many years ago, nobody would think, no member of the executive or Parliament would have thought of criticising a judge in respect to the way in which a judge had discharged his or her duty, his judicial duties, or his judicial duties. But that's changed. The executive now interferes in the way in which judges discharge their judicial duties. They'll comment upon the appropriateness of a sentence, for example. Whereas that's a matter for the judge, and if the sentence isn't appropriate, that's a matter for the appeal courts. And so there has been that blurring. And I think that's one thing that we will have to look at. We'll have to look at circumstances where ministers take upon themselves too much, I think, where they assume too much power, where the power should be left to the judiciary or to Parliament, not arrogated by the minister to himself or herself.
Another question?
Yep.
Stephen?
Does the definition of corruption, is it restricted to personal gain, or does it include the payment into party funds for a beneficial decision?
No, it doesn't require financial gain. I mean, a lot of corruption doesn't involve financial gain. It involves a benefit, but not financial gain. For example, a lot of people might abuse their office by appointing, say, their son to a position that he should occupy. Now, that appointment wasn't done for financial benefit. It was done out of love or compassion, but it was wrong. It was an abusive process, an abusive office. So it doesn't need to be any financial benefit. All it needs to be is a benefit of some kind or a detriment. So, and it doesn't have to be a financial detriment either. But in many cases, especially in nepotism and cronyism and things like that, there isn't any financial gain, but the conduct is still serious.
I think what I was getting at was in recent years there's been some corruption of the political process through the funding of political parties, which is seen by the public as being a return for general decisions.
That wouldn't be within my remit, I don't think. The political parties aren't part of the public administration, are independent of it. I agree. I think there is some dissatisfaction in relation to the way in which political parties are provided financial benefits, but that will not be within my remit.
One last question, Tony?
Sir, thank you for your presentation. It's been most illuminating. My question refers to the private sector and the Fair Work Australia organisation, which is part of the Federal Industrial Relations Syndicate. Is there lap over between your organisation and theirs? If so, where is it? I'm aware of a situation where employment circumstances were put before Fair Work Australia and they wiped it off, and I think incorrectly. And is there any area of redress? Is there delineation? Could you comment on that?
No, I don't have any jurisdiction over Fair Work Australia. Fair Work Australia is a Commonwealth organisation. My jurisdiction is limited to the state public service.
Commissioner, it is our custom to present a little present to you, but I was warned by your staff that you may have to decline that. Actually, unwittingly, I offered to buy Commissioner a red wine before lunch, and he said, "No, I won't have that." And I thought, gosh, maybe I've overstepped that mark. and I asked him why. He said, "I don't drink during February." February, and I thought about that for a while. A little bit later, I said, "Why February?" He said, "Because it's the shortest month."